They didn't invite me out of love. They invited me because not inviting me would look bad. The envelope was pristine. Calligraphy perfect. Gold-foiled edges that whispered we're better than you. Inside, the words were polite, formal, hollow. We request the honor of your presence. Honor. Funny choice of word. Because in this family, presence was tolerated, not honored. I held the invite for a long time. Not because I was flattered. Because I was debating if I wanted to walk back into a place where I'd always been the afterthought. Sophia was the golden daughter. Always had been. The straight-A student. The beauty pageant queen. The one who married into potential. Me? I was the one who settled. The single mom. The cautionary tale. At least, in their version of the story. I wasn't supposed to succeed. I wasn't supposed to be happy. But life doesn't follow their scripts. And even if they refused to see it, I had built a life out of the very scraps they thought would break me. Liam was playing on the floor. Building a city out of blocks. A world where everything fit because he said so. He looked up. Are we going to Aunt Sophia's? I didn't answer right away. Because this wasn't a simple visit. This was walking into a performance where I'd been cast as the family embarrassment. Again. But Liam's eyes held no bitterness. Just curiosity. Because children don't carry the weight of adult expectations. They just want to be included. Yes, baby. We're going. Because sometimes, you don't show up for their approval. You show up to remind yourself you were never the problem. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a masterclass in subtle insults. Texts that dripped with backhanded compliments. We'll find you something appropriate to wear. Don't worry about the gift, your presence is enough. Translations, you're not like us. But we'll tolerate you for appearances. I smiled through it all. Because their words no longer had claws. They were noise. Predictable. Irrelevant. The wedding was set in a venue that screamed, look at us. High ceilings. Crystal chandeliers. Walls lined with people more interested in networking than celebrating love. But then again, this wasn't really about love. Not for Sophia. It was about status. Optics. The curated image of a perfect life. As Liam and I walked in, the glances came. Quick. Judging. Dismissive. But I was used to it. Used to being the wrong kind of woman in the right kind of dress. Sophia approached. Kissed my cheek. Smiled the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. So glad you made it, Orly. It wouldn't be family without you. The lie hung in the air. But I let it. Because I didn't come here to fight for a seat at a table I outgrew. The reception was a blur of polite conversations and strategic alliances. Liam stuck close, sensing the undercurrents even if he didn't understand them. He didn't need to. He just needed to see that we belonged anywhere we chose to be. I found a quiet corner. Watched the performance unfold. Charlotte, their perfect mother, basking in the glow of her successful daughter's wedding. Every smile a calculated move. Every compliment a transaction. I was the only unpaid guest. Until he walked up. Michael. The groom. And in his eyes, there was no calculation. No transaction. Just recognition. Orly. His voice was softer than I remembered. Because years ago, when his sister was dying, I sat by her side. Not for charity. Not for credit. Just because no one else did. And he remembered. I didn't know you were Sophia's sister. Neither did she, I almost said. But instead I smiled. Small. Real. He knelt to greet Liam. Introduced himself like a gentleman. Not for show. For connection. And in that moment, for the first time that day, I felt seen. Not as a burden. Not as the outsider. As Orly. As the evening stretched on, Michael and I spoke in snippets. Casual. Easy. Nothing scandalous. But in a room built on facades, authenticity feels revolutionary. Sophia noticed. Of course she did. Her smiles grew tighter. her voice sharper. Because in her mind, the wedding was her stage, and no one else was allowed a spotlight. But I wasn't there to steal anything. I was there to witness. And that was more threatening than any scandal. As the night wound down, I caught my reflection in the gilded mirrors. Not the family's reflection of me. Mine. And for the first time, I saw a woman who didn't shrink. Who didn't apologize for taking up space. The invite hadn't been out of love, but my presence was my own choice. And that choice was power. They invited me because they had to. But I showed up because I chose to. And sometimes, the loudest statement is simply existing where they said you shouldn't. To them, I was invisible. But he remembered when I was someone's light. In a room full of polished smiles, he was the only one who looked at me and actually saw me. Michael. The groom. The man who was supposed to be swept up in Sophia's perfection. But somehow his eyes found mine. And in that glance, the past surfaced. It was subtle. A flicker of recognition. A question forming before his lips caught up. Orly, he said it slowly, as if tasting a memory he hadn't revisited in years. I nodded. And that's when it clicked. Not the wedding. Not the family drama. But the memory of a hospital room. His sister. Emily. Young. Kind-hearted. Dying. And in those final weeks, it wasn't Sophia who sat by her bedside. It was me. Because Emily didn't care about status or appearances. She cared about kindness. I used to bring her sketchbooks. Talk with her when the silence got too heavy. I never did it for recognition. Just because no one else was showing up. But Michael remembered. I always wanted to thank you. His voice was different now. Not the rehearsed tone of the evening. But real. Grounded. You made those last weeks less lonely for her. I never forgot that. In that moment, the noise of the wedding faded. Because sometimes, the smallest kindnesses echo the loudest. We stood there, two people surrounded by gold-trimmed conversations that didn't matter. And yet, this mattered. You're marrying my sister, I said, not as an accusation. As a fact that tasted strange on my tongue. He smiled. Not the performative grin I'd seen him wear earlier. Something softer. Seems so. But there was something behind those words. A hesitation. A wait. Liam tugged at my hand. Bored. Restless. Michael crouched down. You must be Liam. Your mom's a bit of a legend in my family stories. Liam blinked. Uncertain. But then offered a shy smile. It was small. But real. Like his mother's. As Michael stood, his gaze lingered. Funny, isn't it? How the people who give the most expect the least. I didn't have a reply. Because humility isn't a currency this family ever valued. But Michael wasn't like them. Throughout the evening, he found small moments to check in. Not in grand gestures. In quiet acknowledgements. A glass of water when I stood alone. A shared glance when the family's barbs got sharper. He didn't make a scene. But in a family where ignorance was tradition, awareness felt radical. Sophia noticed. Of course she did. Her laughs got louder. Her compliments grew more pointed. Because to her, attention was a resource to be hoarded. And sharing it was an offense. At one point, she slipped beside me. Having fun orally? The question was sweetly venomous. Don't worry, Michael's just being polite. He's always had a soft spot for strays. A perfect strike. Meant to hurt. But it didn't. Because pity was never Michael's language. Respect was. I turned to her. Smiled. Then it's lucky your fiancé values kindness. Rare quality these days. Her eyes narrowed. But before she could retaliate, Michael called for her. Timing. Impeccable. The evening carried on. But the undercurrents had shifted. This wasn't just a wedding anymore. It was a mirror. Reflecting not what the family pretended to be, but what they actually were. And somewhere in that reflection, Michael was seeing things he couldn't unsee. Not scandal, but truth. About Sophia. About himself. About what family really meant. Before the night ended, he found me once more. Thank you for coming, Orly. Even when it wasn't easy, I shrugged. You don't need to thank me. I'm used to being the shadow in other people's spotlights. His expression softened. Maybe the spotlight's been aimed in the wrong direction all along, he said it quietly. But it echoed, louder than any toast that night. As Liam and I left, I felt it. A shift. Not in how they saw me, but in how I saw myself. Because maybe, just maybe, being overlooked gave me the clearest view of who truly mattered. In a world obsessed with status, kindness feels radical. And sometimes, the people they dismiss become the ones who define what matters most. They called it a toast. But I knew better. It was an execution. Dressed in lace, served with champagne. The reception was winding down. The speeches had been as expected. Sanitized stories. Fake nostalgia. A parade of people pretending they knew Sophia better than she knew herself. And then, it was my turn. Uninvited. But chosen. Chosen by Sophia. Chosen by the same sister who'd spent her life keeping me out of the spotlight. Until now. My dear sister Orly, she began, voice dripping with sugary poison, has always been our family's wild card. The crowd chuckled. Safe laughter. The kind that follows social cues, not genuine amusement. While some of us took the traditional path, she gestured to herself, as if posing for a magazine, Orly chose, let's say, a more unique journey. Liam's hand slipped into mine. Small. Steady. Anchoring me. I felt the familiar heat rise. The sting of being made the family's cautionary tale. Again. But this time, I wasn't 19. I wasn't ashamed. I was prepared. But you know what they say, Sophia continued. Family is family. Even the ones who stumble. Polite laughter. Uncomfortable shifting. This wasn't a speech. This was a knife disguised as sentiment. I could have walked out. Years ago I would have. But this time, I stayed seated. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to flinch. Michael was watching. Not with the blank politeness the others wore. But with something sharper. Disapproval. Disappointment. Not at me. At her. Elenina chimed in. Of course she did. We're just so glad Orly found her way. Even if it took a few missteps. A double strike. Sister and mother, working in tandem. I almost admired the coordination. But venom is venom, no matter how elegantly delivered. The guests didn't know where to look. Politeness kept them seated. But discomfort had them squirming. Good. Let them sit in the mess they applauded. I could feel Liam's gaze. Worried. Confused. But when I squeezed his hand, he smiled. Small. But enough. Because no matter how loud they were, he was my reason. My truth. Sophia raised her glass. To family. Because at the end of the day, blood ties us together. Even when life disappoints. The crowd lifted their glasses. Mechanical. Mindless. But not Michael. His glass stayed on the table. His jaw set. His decision made. He stood. The scrape of his chair echoed louder than the scattered applause. If I may, his voice was calm. Measured. But underneath, it carried weight. The weight of a man no longer willing to play along. Sophia's right. Family does matter. Murmurs. Nervous glances. He wasn't following the script. Good. And while we're sharing stories, let me share one of my own. He looked at me. Not as a symbol. Not as a mistake. As orally. He told them about Emily. His sister. Her final months. How hospital rooms feel emptier when no one shows up. How Sophia never made time. Too busy. Too important. But orally did. Orally Saturday, orally listened. Orally showed kindness without expectation. In those quiet moments, orally taught me what family really is. Not titles. Not appearances. But presence. Compassion. Integrity. The silence was thick. Uncomfortable. Perfect. So when you toast a family, remember who truly embodies it. He lifted his glass. To orally. The applause started slow. Hesitant. But then, it grew. Not because of social obligation. Because truth resonates. And that moment was pure truth. Sophia's face was a portrait of disbelief. Ella Lenina clutched her pearls, as if manners could save face. But the facade had cracked. Michael's final words landed softly. But their impact was seismic. I won't marry into cruelty. Kindness is not optional. And today, it's clear who deserves my loyalty. He turned to me. And with that, he walked off the stage. Not with drama. With dignity. The stage they built to humiliate me became his platform for truth. And I didn't have to say a single word. They built a stage to break me. But kindness built a louder truth. Because real character reveals itself when the script falls apart. He wasn't supposed to choose sides. But he chose mine. And the entire room forgot how to breathe. After his toast, the air shifted. Heavy. Electric. Like the seconds before a storm when the sky holds its breath. Michael didn't wait for applause. He didn't need it. His words had done what applause never could. They revealed. Sophia stood frozen. The perfect bride with cracks showing in her porcelain facade. Her smile was still there. But it was stretched. Tight. Performative. Michael, darling, surely you're not serious. But he was. I've never been more serious, Sophia. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Because truth spoken calmly disarms louder lies. He turned to the guests. I know this isn't the spectacle you came for. But maybe that's the problem. We've all been too comfortable celebrating appearances and ignoring character. The murmur in the room grew restless. The carefully curated social mask was slipping. He looked back at Sophia. You're brilliant. Beautiful. Undeniably ambitious. But compassion should never be a footnote. Her lips parted. A retort forming. But nothing came out. Because no defense can rewrite a truth everyone just witnessed. Michael's gaze softened when it met mine. When my sister was dying, Aurelie showed up. Every day. Not for recognition. Not for gratitude. But because it was the right thing to do. His words weren't scripted. They were lived. Today, I watched as that same woman was publicly belittled by her own family. And I realized this isn't a family I want to marry into. The gasp that rippled through the crowd wasn't shock. It was recognition. Because deep down they knew. They just never expected someone to say it out loud. Sophia's composure cracked. You're humiliating me on my wedding day. Michael shook his head. No, Sophia. You did that to yourself. Every syllable was a mirror. He stepped down from the stage. Walked towards me. The room was silent. His steps weren't hurried. No drama. Just decision. Orly, he said, his hand extending, would you walk out with me? Not as an escape. As a statement. Because leaving wasn't about retreating. It was about reclaiming. I looked at Liam. His small hand gripped mine. This wasn't just my moment. It was ours. I stood. Not defiantly. But with quiet certainty. The kind that comes from knowing you're choosing yourself. The walk out of that hall felt surreal. Not because of the whispers. Not because of the stares. Because it was the first time I wasn't walking away in shame. I was walking away in truth. Outside, the air was crisp. Unfiltered. Honest. Michael ran a hand through his hair. Nervous. Relieved. I'm sorry for how today unfolded. I shook my head. You have nothing to apologize for. Because truth never requires apology. We stood in that silence. Comfortable. Earned. Liam tugged at his jacket. Are you still gonna get married, mister? The innocence of it broke the tension. Michael crouched to Liam's level. Someday, kiddo. But to the right person. For the right reasons. Liam nodded, satisfied. The three of us walked away from that venue. No flashbulbs. No fanfare. But every step felt like a declaration. We choose kindness. We choose integrity. We choose each other. Later that evening, over simple food at a quiet diner, Michael shared stories of Emily. The way she laughed. The way she found beauty in overlooked moments. The way Orly had been a light in that darkness. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't a cinematic ending. But it was real. And real is rarer than gold-trimmed ballrooms. Michael didn't choose sides. He chose values. And that choice echoed louder than any vow they could have exchanged that day. He didn't choose me to spite them. He chose kindness over cruelty. Integrity over image. And sometimes, that's the bravest choice of all. Walking away wasn't dramatic. It was necessary. And healing didn't arrive with fanfare. It arrived quietly. One choice at a time. After the wedding, the calls came. Sophia's silence was predictable. Elenina's passive-aggressive texts dripped with faux concern. You've embarrassed the family enough. Do the decent thing and stay quiet. As if I hadn't spent years doing exactly that. But silence isn't the same as peace. And this time, I wasn't buying either. Michael didn't flood me with constant apologies. He showed up, in the small ways that mattered. A coffee dropped off before Liam's school run. A phone call not to fix me, but to listen. Healing isn't loud. It's chosen. Over and over. We visited Emily's grave on a cloudy afternoon. Liam brought a painted stone. His own idea. Bright colors. Childish swirls. But it meant something. So she knows we remember her, he said. Michael's throat tightened. Grief is a strange thing. It never leaves. It just softens when shared. Standing there, with the weight of what was lost and the quiet hope of what could be, I realized something. This wasn't about revenge. Not anymore. It was about choosing where I poured my energy. And I was done watering dead roots. The family's version of success was a performance. Mine was a practice. Showing up for Liam. Building my small business with real connection. Nurturing friendships that weren't transactions. It wasn't glamorous. But it was real. Michael fit into that life not as a rescue, but as a reflection. A man who valued what the world often overlooked. Kindness. Integrity. Presence. We didn't rush. There were no grand declarations. No rebound romances. Just dinners that turned into long conversations. Walks where silence wasn't awkward. Moments where Liam's laughter felt like the only music we needed. Healing isn't a destination. It's a daily decision. To stop rehearsing the pain. To start embracing the peace. Sophia's social circle moved on quickly. Scandal has a short shelf life when there's no fuel to keep it burning. But for me, the quiet rebuild was far more valuable than any headline. One morning, Michael showed up with a question. No ring. No audience. Just this. Can we build something together? Not for appearances. But for the life we actually want. And in that moment, I knew. He wasn't asking for a performance. He was asking for partnership. Liam was part of that conversation. His opinion mattered. As long as there's pancakes on Sundays, he said, grinning. Deal sealed. There were no viral posts. No orchestrated announcements. Just quiet choices. One after the other. Because healing isn't loud. It's chosen. Elenina's final attempt at control came via a letter. Handwritten. Formal. This family demands dignity. Your recent choices have been disappointing. I didn't reply. Because silence, when chosen on your terms, isn't submission. It's power. A year after the wedding, our life looked nothing like what the family had planned for me. And that was the victory. Not in spite. In freedom. Healing is choosing not to prove them wrong. It's choosing to live right for yourself. Healing isn't loud. It's not a viral moment. It's not their approval. It's choosing peace over performance. Every single day, they said I'd never have more than scraps. But I built a feast they'll never taste. A year later, I stood in my own cafe. Modest. Warm. Alive. Walls lined with art from local artists. A children's corner. Liam insisted on designing himself. It wasn't glamorous. But it was mine. Every table filled with laughter, soft conversations, the hum of community. Not status. Not optics. Just people being seen. The kind of place I used to wish for when no one noticed me. Now, I had created it. Michael walked in, carrying Liam on his back. Routine. Comfort. Pancakes are on me today, he announced, grinning. Because some promises are worth keeping sacred. This was the life they never imagined for me. Because it didn't fit their narrative of success. No luxury cars. No flashy photo shoots. But every inch of it was built with integrity. And that is priceless. Sophia and Elenina had faded into their own noise. Occasional social media posts. Curated happiness. Carefully crafted perfection. But hollow. Because when your life is built on appearances, there's no foundation to stand on when no one's looking. They never reached out again. And I never reached back. Not out of bitterness. Out of peace. Because revisiting their world would be like rereading a book where the ending never changes. Michael's business flourished, too. Not because of scandal. But because of quiet consistency. He became a partner in his own right. Not in their world. In ours. One evening as we closed the cafe, he pulled out a small box. No spectacle. No audience. Just us. And Liam, of course, watching with wide-eyed excitement. Inside was a simple ring. Silver. Elegant. But what caught my breath was the sapphire. Emily's heirloom. A piece of history carried forward with meaning. This isn't a grand proposal, Michael said. This is a promise. To keep building this life with you. The real one. Not the one they planned for you. I didn't need to say yes. It was already written in every choice we'd made together. But I said it anyway. Soft. Sure. Yes. Liam's cheer filled the room. A sound more precious than any applause. In that moment, I realized, this was the life they never imagined for me. Because they couldn't fathom a happiness not rooted in their approval. But happiness built on authenticity is unshakable. I wasn't the afterthought. I wasn't the cautionary tale. I was the author now. They told me I'd never be more than a shadow in someone else's success story. But shadows are cast by those who stand tall. And I was standing. Not for revenge. Not for validation. But for the simple radical truth that I deserved to exist in my own light. As we locked up, Michael squeezed my hand. Funny, he said. They spent so long trying to define you. And here you are, undefinable. I smiled. Because freedom tastes best when it's seasoned with peace. This was the life they never imagined for me. And that was the sweetest victory. They wrote me off. They wrote my story before I could finish it. But the life I built outside their expectations is more than success. It's freedom. And that is a story they'll never understand. If you've ever been told you'd never be enough, but you built your own life anyway, drop a heart in the comments. This story is yours too.